you hear me?
And Matt Malone.
Here.
We have 6
Thank-
members present. Quorum is established.
Thank you so much. We want to go ahead and welcome our folks online. If you can, we only have Stephanie and Denise and Garyana. So Garyana, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yep. Garyana Youngblood, Office of Reentry and Justice.
Denise?
Denise Subcommittee, Research and Evaluation Manager, Office of Reentry and Justice.
Stephanie, you mind introducing yourself?
I'm just a member of the public who's just is interested in paying attention.
Thank you and welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you.
At this time, are there any announcements? Does folks have any announcements they want to bring to the table?
Actually, I do. I just want to publicly thank a lot of our stakeholders in the community that attended our community stakeholder workshop for our restorative justice initiative. It took place on, gosh, so much has been happening this week. It was this week. That's the part. I can't remember which day. Was that Tuesday? It was Tuesday. It was Tuesday. We had a great turnout. We had about close to 40 or so people. It was held at the Rise Center. We got a lot of great feedback from folks. And so in terms of next steps, we are preparing to release a community survey that we will then push out as far and wide as possible. So anyone here around the table, if you have contact lists, if you wouldn't mind helping us push it out, or folks on the call, be happy to receive your assistance in that regard. So looking forward to bring back some more updates once we collect all that information and that assessment.
So, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more announcements? Now at this time, I would like to open it up for public comment on any items under this jurisdiction of our job and not on this agenda. Any public comment? Hearing and seeing none. Next agenda item is to approve the record of actions from our August 24th, 2023 data subcommittee meeting. I think most of y'all may have already take a look at it. Yeah, we're gonna have it on the screen. Then we'll go ahead if there is a motion on the table to, all right.
I move that we approve the record of action.
Thank you. And before we do a roll call vote, is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing none for public comment, if we can get a roll call vote.
Oh, we had a second?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you motioned. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, then I second.
Hearing on if we can get a roll call vote for the.
All right. Yes. Shannon,
Yes.
Alberto Garabee,
Yes.
Patrice Guillory,
Every time. So now I'm like trying to.
Patrice Guillory,
Yes.
Gilbert Salinas,
Yes.
Shayla Bonner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving to item number 4, to discuss the process to recommend additional data points to the sheriff's office. And we talked about this last meeting. We've gotten some bullet points from the Subcommittee. We didn't get to this. We
didn't get to do, yeah, so we didn't get to this at the full our job meeting to get everyone's feedback about moving this forward. So we placed it back on the agenda in case there was any other changes that the data subcommittee maybe want to also recommend, or at least discuss a process of how to move forward with these additional items.
Yeah, so I actually had a question about how do we move things, because now from what I hear, like we're, instead of reporting to the PPC, we'll be reporting to the equity, right? And then it goes up that ladder, right?
Mhm.
But since this is in relation to the sheriff oversight, will we still follow that process, or does it go to the board of supervisors, the board of supervisors?
Well, I don't know. I think I assume it could be as simple as just maybe sharing with the sheriff's office and say, hey, is this something that can be done? Yes or no type of thing, to include in a future, report. Because I think the next quarterly report, I'm guessing is, October, November, possibly. November will be the next one.
Okay.
So, and then the full body doesn't meet again to discuss this until doesn't meet again, I just should say, till December.
Okay.
So, it's kind of depending on how quickly we will want to see some of this stuff be shared in the report. We could either wait till you get full feedback from the full R job, which means you won't probably see some of this passed on until sometime next year, or if, we can simply make a request to the sheriff's office to see what can be done here to include some of these data points. Say that again. Utilize the next report. So we'll have, now that's another thing. If so, the next report isn't until October, we can just wait to see based on, because I'm sure he heard the feedback from public comment, so there may be some alterations there too.
And then the board of supervisors also has some things that they want to see. So it might be, I mean, we could wait and then see how that report goes. And then since the full body meets in December, we can discuss these. Hey, based off the report in October, here are the things that we're missing, and then we can put in a request.
It's probably not gonna include the stuff. That would be my guess. I don't know that we have the analysts to pull some of that data. It's gonna take a while to get some of the stuff that we discussed.
Okay.
Because we just don't have someone that's like, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? I don't know that we have the personnel to handle that type of data extraction. Yeah, so
Okay. Well, that's promising.
And CAO staff departments.
I'm willing to hold off just to see how things go and play out.
Yeah. I agree.
Any other, I'll open it up for public comment. Any public comment on item number 4? Oh, go ahead, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Can you hear me? And I guess, can you see me? I don't, because it's still it's still the report that's up. So I'm assuming I can be heard.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I appreciate being able to attend and being able to listen. Representing the public, I guess I just want to state that there's a real concern by the general public to have more of this data in the sheriff's report. It's a quarterly report where it appears that the supervisors are trying to have the oversight of the sheriff's department. And I do understand, how intensive it is, labor speaking, in terms of gathering this data. But if it can't be done by the next report, I understand that. But I think at the very minimum, I think this something needs to formally come from the committee, letting the sheriff's department know what the supervisors are looking for. I am looking right at page 7, you know, it's a lot and it's good. It's important. I mean, these are the things that are gonna restore trust. And for some people who don't have any trust, build trust. So, so I guess I would feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that at least this RJOB data subcommittee is going to be officially letting the sheriff know that this is what the supervisors are looking for.
I think the idea is to hold off until our full body, because our full body we haven't gone over these recommendations with our full body yet. And since it won't be on, of course, you know, with the time restraint, it won't be on the sheriff's next report. We want to allow time to go over with our full body with this, is what we're saying.
Okay,
Makes sense. Yeah.
okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Any other public comment? All right, so we'll move to item number 5 to discuss strategies or action plan on how to utilize data.
Yeah, so this is kind of a continuation of a discussion I feel like was opening up at one of our prior body meetings to discuss, well, where the data subcommittee in the past has received quarterly information, both from probation, sheriff's office, and also Office of Ed. And in receiving that information, it was great that it illuminated where things stand in terms of rates of disparities within those respective populations that those agencies work with. But ultimately, we didn't get a full picture across the justice system. And also the question of, even when we receive this information, what are we doing with it? What questions are we trying to answer? What strategies or certain solutions that we're trying to look at in order where that data then helps support taking further action, whatever that might be. So this is to bring that back to discuss a little bit further about, are we looking to continue to be a receiver of information? If so, how that will even be managed? And then also, I think more importantly, what is it that we're trying to accomplish in receiving that information on an ongoing basis? What are we looking to do here? Ironically, the next item is going to really speak to directly that, how we were able to identify an effective training program based on some of the information that we saw coming out of the data subcommittee. So that's one, one avenue or one example of how that can be done. But ultimately, we think of ourselves as a subcommittee that looks at data and information. What is essentially our role in helping to shape what should be the next steps forward when we have this information come forward at all.
Especially, but maybe this is very elementary on part, but like you have to wait till the data comes in so you can review it and compare it to, the population and everything that like we're asking for on that page. And without knowing that stuff, you don't know if there's, on the surface is like what is broken, what is wrong, if anything at all. You just don't know those answers until you get the data. That's me looking at it from like the numbers.
Kind of just reminds me of what Gigi and Stephanie were bringing up in the full body meeting. Like, Gigi's point is like, there's a lot of mental health, there's substance use, there's this, there's that, and then we like the diversion. They've been taking a look at like the youth diversion and all that stuff. So just trying to see how data plays out, where the gaps are and what's needed. We won't know until we actually get that data, so maybe use for this group to continue to get that data and then using some of this time to look at it, review it, see where the gaps are, and then like we're doing with the youth training, see what other avenues are out there for.
A lot of information in front of us yet,
Right.
but,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, how we have the information kind of coming in, and then whether or not we summarize it or try to collate it as it comes in, seems kind of important to me too, because and my sense is that the committee will be over time evaluating impact, right? So when we get it on the front end, do we want to generate some sort of document or some sort of analysis on our part as to this is what we see at this point, and maybe not today, right? Because we're still waiting for the first kind of group of data to come in. But at that point, we say, okay, here's what we're seeing from this day, the data we're getting here, here's where it is there, and kind of be a organize the data for the full board and for the full body and for everyone else as it comes in. I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I know that it's kind of overwhelming at times to get all of this. And so the sooner we kind of jump into that, if that's what we want to do, the better. And we start seeing, report A, report B, 2, 3, 4 months later, or however, and then we take the lead in analyzing it in other words, from the perspective of the committee.
I think the other thing too, and I think this was also mentioned in the full body meeting, bringing that out to community so that they know what's going on. And again, like we called it a community forum, but we haven't had
Well, so even something like that,
Yeah.
so I know sometimes I have concerns that when we do present the information, absent of strategies or ideas of how you can move that from, all right, this is the doom and gloom picture. Now, how do we fix it? Which was often a lot of the response that actually came from the community at that particular listening session. And so in all fairness, though, I do agree there are times where we need opportunities to listen to community. We also need opportunities where we're informing and educating them about what are some potential solutions out there. I don't know how we would do that. And like I said, it is pretty overwhelming because we're talking about an entire spectrum here involving so many different departments. So I guess how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
The only thing I would say is the wording from fix it to how can we make an impact and change things versus fixing it. I mean, I don't know that necessarily everything across the board needs fixing, but how can we make adjustments?
Also, how we interact with other committees on that too, because I don't know that is it the part of our task to make those recommendations, or are we as the data committee, subcommittee, just sort of responsible primarily for gathering the data? And then I call it data and data interchangeably. But I mean, I just don't, do people see this subcommittee putting together putting together some sort of go forward plan with action plan with that, or is that something we bring to the group and our task sort of ends at that point, or we interact with other subcommittees there?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
And in the past, so there's been, the committee has had a work plan that kind of took some of the primary recommendations, broke that down to size to align where there's some possible next steps from the full body, 18 or so recommendations that are somewhat data related, and that then be essentially assigned to the data subcommittee. So one thing is we probably visit our work plan in the past and kind of adjust that. And But where there was some traction over the last year or so is then in receiving information from different departments, because at that point, that hadn't happened either. So that was sort of an evolution, but then you're not getting data from everybody, just you here or there. And I think that the committee was just thinking through, well, what can we do with what we do have? So. Yeah, looks like, I'm sorry, I don't cheer. Hands up.
I would just add to that, it was about building up the data too. So like getting the data and then asking the questions to inform more data collection, like what was missing from the data and what could still be, because I know the office ed is amazing.
Very much.
Yeah.
Providing data as well as
Yeah.
information.
Mhm.
And so it was asking more, it led to more questions.
Mhm.
And then, but there's huge gaps. So the idea originally with stepping up and everything was having all of the data so we could see from the point in time the contact was made all the way through the system and the outcomes. But there's been like, we don't have the DA data and we didn't have the public defender data. So, without that data, it's hard to see how somebody rolls through the system, and so it ends up falling on saying, well, you're just people, when in reality, we don't know where the inequities happen, right? Because we don't have all the data. And
Or that it gets compounded based on a decision.
and then without the LEAs, people don't recognize sheriff as the intake, not
Yeah.
necessarily the rest or. So then it just sort of, without more data,
Yeah,
it leads to wrong conclusions,
100%,
And I
from
knew
the,
your look when I said that, I was
Yes.
just repeating myself. I was naming that as a statement.
no, but I mean, from outside looking in, like to understand the behind the scenes sort of like, we're countywide, but we have certain areas in jurisdiction and like, what do those communities look like? We're put in position to patrol this community, right? And safeguard this community, right? And then versus like, somebody had mentioned, I think in the last meeting, like Danville as one of our contract cities, right? What does that community look like? And like, what's the disparity? And like, you have to understand it all to really understand like, well, why are they arresting this group of people more than so? Like, this is where we're put in position to patrol, like, so like you expect the outcome to be, right? So you have to understand it all without just saying across the board, you're arresting X amount of percent versus X amount of percent over here. So that's the data really, when you analyze it,
Yeah.
give you a bigger picture and a better conclusion as to what's really happening.
Yeah, from my experience with this committee and with trying for the last 5 years to obtain data from a broad range of our stakeholders across the county, it's really challenging for a lot of reasons. But it's also really, really challenging when we as a subcommittee do not have more specific and more pointed topics that we're interested in or trying to unpack. And I'll be talking later about the effective youth interactions program that we're getting started, but that happened kind of serendipitously as a result of analyses that came out of the DOJ, looking at those analyses for adults and youth, looking at racial disparities, looking then at where those racial disparities occurred and the trajectory. So it was just this evolution in a way with the existing data that we had that then led to this project. Now, we're not, and by the way, that data all came from the state. It was not data in its public domain. It was not data that we have. And so we're still working on that. And so there are a lot of challenges. And I suggest in some ways that we identify a handful of key domains that the body is interested in that we can work towards to build the data to sort of unpack a story if there is one, surrounding what's going on, if there is anything that is of concern, and where would we want to start with this? Beto, you mentioned something about, well, what's going on in Danville? What's going on in other parts of the county? Is that what we want to do, or is there another direction surrounding diversion? Diversion, I know, is a really important topic, but we have absolutely no data or systems yet in place to track what's going on with diversion. And that could take some time, but also it takes conversations with the stakeholders to make sure that they're collecting the right data for us to do what we would like to do, whether that be our body or the ORESJ, to conduct that evaluation of diversion. So I think there are a number of issues here that are really quite big, and my suggestion would be to try to parse it out a bit as best as possible, because we're also operating at a high level with trying to collaborate with health services to get that data linkage, and that's a long process. And yeah, I think anyway, those are my thoughts.
And just to clarify, the only reason I had mentioned Danville is because that was the example that was used in the previous RJOB meeting. It wasn't.
Oh, yeah, it was just an example, Beto. I wasn't picking on you in any way. I was just using the example as an example. So, but the point is still the same. Are we interested in what's going on across each of the separate law enforcement communities? Is that something that matters to this body? Do we have that data? And is that something that the community wants to better understand within appropriate norms of making sure that we're not identifying particular individuals and keeping anonymity in place?
That's definitely seem like a big thing, because and I think what you mentioned around like we need to find basically a starting point where we start. And I know some things came out of the general meeting that some folks felt like we needed to collect data on, but it's also, is that data being captured? Is another big hurdle. If they're not capturing it, do they have the capacity to capture it? And then how are we, like, how is it coming to us? Is it going to be a spreadsheet? Is it, it's a lot of questions up in the air, and it's a lot to digest.
But one thing I do want to mention though, but in terms of what you just mentioned, Denise, more than the relevant topics, I keep coming back to the purpose that this body is here for, which is to implement those recommendations. So I would probably recommend that maybe for a future meeting, we look back at those recommendations. You did.
I did.
That we look back at those recommendations along with maybe our previous work plan to see how we can maybe adjust from there. And obviously, though, even those recommendations, like, they're pretty ambitious,
And they're vague too, I think, in some ways, at least
Yeah, so-
for a nerd like me. It's like, you could take any of those objectives and go after them in any number of different ways. And I think that's part of the challenge too.
This harkens back to, I think, what Supervisor Joy was stating in that last equity committee meeting for the RJOB update, for us to prioritize what recommendations we want to start really moving the needle on. Because I feel like all intents and purposes, I think all the spaces are ready to receive formal proposals, next steps. What are you looking at? What resources do you need? On and on and on. We just haven't gotten our ducks in a row to figure out what that will be. So that would be my recommendation.
We'll open it up for public comment. I know we kind of just been discussing it, but is there any public comment? And yeah, I think my big takeaway is like to revisit the work plan, revisit our recommendations. Really just find our starting point because it is so much that we want to tackle. And then really look at what data is being truly tracked. And if, you know, like I said, if these recommendations are being put out there, are these different entities, do they have the capacity to get it? Stephanie, I see your hand.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. Yeah, I just want to say that I just think doing this is really important. I think gathering the information and, you know, taking it one step at a time. I listened to all the comments and I can understand how overwhelming some of this can be. I understand, you know, some of it's, you know, it's uncomfortable. I mean, I live in Danville and I have gotten involved in county meetings, you know, after the second man of color was killed by the same police officer experiencing mental health crisis. So, you know, that's why I'm here. And I know, I think law enforcement should be looked across all 5 regions, 5 districts. And I think there needs to be a lot of community input as to how people feel. And I know some people feel very well served by the police and others don't. Others feel targeted, they're frightened, they're scared, they're so afraid of being pulled over. I mean, the second report that the sheriff shared at the County Board of Supervisors meeting, it did dig a little bit deeper. And I think it was very relieving for people to finally hear that, yes, the group that I represent, racially, ethnically, whatever, is overrepresented 4 times by our population. You know, I can only speak for myself as an individual. And when I've been on the other side of wrongdoing, when it's ignored, when it goes unnoticed, it's swept under the rug, it feels horrible. When wrongdoing is at least acknowledged and looked at and owned, and there's a commitment to do better, that's already a big step in the right direction. So, you know, and I know this is hard for law enforcement. I have a lot of respect for law enforcement, but I think it's important to remember that they are there to serve and protect. And I think these kinds of analyses can be done in a kind way and in a supportive way, rather, you know, not through so much finger pointing, but I think we know why we're doing this. I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that live in the county that know why this is being done. And in terms of vagueness, a lot of these bullet points on page 7 are, I don't know, they don't seem real vague to me. They're pretty specific. So again, I'm just speaking up on behalf of what I hear and what I believe to be, you know, what's going to be helpful in the future. And it's holding our law enforcement authorities more accountable. Thank you.
Can I just to clarify, Stephanie, the recommendations that I think Denise was referring to in regards to vagueness was not necessarily the data points on this document here, but I would say 18, I think the 17, 18, I don't know how many, but it's a lot of the the racial justice task force recommendations that were approved by the board of supervisors, that our job is responsible for overseeing the implementation of to a degree, or at least that's what the charge is. So that's what we're referring to. Those are really big recommendations.
Okay.
And, you know, going back to the cliche, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And then us as the data subcommittee trying to find our space in all of that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I am very much a novice here. But I care. I'm very concerned, and I want to see things get better. So thank you for clarifying that. I don't admit that I get all of how the administrative piece is done, but thank you for your patience and for listening.
You know, actually what you're sharing, first of all, we appreciate that you care. That is appreciated. But then secondly, I think what you're bringing up is probably why we need to bring the recommendations back and discuss them more,
Okay.
get them more closely, put them up on the screen, talk about it more publicly, to remind all of us as to why we were here. It's really to see those recommendations be moved forward.
Right, and this was, because this is item 5, correct? This is discuss strategies or action plans on how you
Yes.
utilize data, correct? Okay. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to.
Absolutely.
Denise?
And I would just want to leverage Stephanie's contributions here, because I think that one of the things that's possible is, Stephanie, I hear you saying that the data that we're asking for, or this body is considering asking of the sheriff's department for better understanding what's going on in the population, is something that is a priority. And if the sheriff's office does not have the capacity to provide that data or conduct those analyses, maybe there's another way that we can get access to information that would touch on those questions that are so important, such as through the DOJ, which is where I often go, or as best as possible. So there are other avenues if we knew what better the priorities were, and we can also then support our colleagues across the county to maybe help save the data, or save it, analyze it, share it. But there might be other ways that we can start, if that's the most important part. So thank you. And also, Stephanie, I just want to say nothing personal about Danville.
Oh, yeah, no. So I guess I'm kind of relieved
I
that
know.
you mentioned it, and I know that you didn't mention it that way, but yeah, but and Denise, thank you for that additional clarification. Everybody's always so kind and so gracious, and I try to be that way too. And sometimes it's hard when you feel pretty passionate and
I hear you.
Yeah, you're concerned. I'm concerned. Yeah. And
I hear you. And that's why, for me, in my role with the ORJ, it's been so challenging. For 5 years, I've been trying to access data, and I'm now in the probation department, where I have, some really lovely privileges to access that, but we still are not able to. And so to answer some of these community questions, there's all kinds of resources that we can utilize that have data by county across the country and across the state. So if we knew, were more pointed about what we were looking for, there might be other avenues where we can access that would serve this body, and ideally, as Patrice points out, the key objectives of this body. So.
Well, thank you. That really makes a lot of sense. I think that clarity has really helped me. I get that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any more public comment? Right. We'll move to item number 6, update on strategies for youth training for law enforcement agencies.
Yeah,
You want to open us up, Patrice?
I'll just open it up and then I'll kick it over to you, Denise. So we just wanted to bring this back as an update to the data subcommittee. We are in partnership with Strategies for Youth, who has a training curriculum trademark and is the only evidence-based training program in the nation for law enforcement officers on adolescent development and youth engagement. And so you all may recall that we've had a lot of conversations around this in the past. At the time, Assistant Sheriff Melissa Pavoon, who was here, also did a lot of research looking into, there's a possibility that Post has some kind of similar youth engagement related training. It did not. We had to look outside of California and found Strategies for Youth that's out there in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And from there, we applied for funding by with Congressman DeSaulnier's office for the federal community project funding, I'm gonna butcher that up. So we received the funding for it, that's for sure. The county got 1.18 million. Half of that will go to ensuring that the training is made available to all law enforcement agencies in the county. And then the other half will be for covering backfill costs to have officers attend the training. So we wanted to at least come back to the committee and share with you what's how this thing will actually roll out over the course of 4 years. So this is kind of a long-term plan here. And then there's also an evaluation component to it as well, to look at the impact of this training once those strategies are actually applied. What is the likely outcomes from that in terms of referrals to probation, juvenile referrals to probation. So with that, I'll have Denise kind of walk us through some of this here, and yeah, we're
Patrice,
really excited.
that was a really big spoiler alert. For all
Oh, was it? My bad.
Still on your turn.
Garyana, would you mind if I shared my screen? I can more easily get through this if I do it that way. Thank you. I will need to be invited to be a host, please.
I think I gave you sharing privileges, Denise. Did it work?
I have it now. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, I guess everyone can see my screen here. As Patrice pointed out, this is an exciting project, at least for me, because it came out of this body, and it came out of this body in the work with Becky Vashikis when she was the chair of the body, and we were going through results that came out of the DOJ surrounding arrests for both adults and juveniles, and we were looking at racial disparities. And when we were looking at that, one of the things that, you know, everybody is really clear and knows that across all counties in the country, we have racial disparities in arrests. But the thing that was most striking at the time to both Becky and me was that the disparities were growing stronger among youth, and that arrests appeared to be going up during this period of, I want to say it was 2015 to 2019, so before the pandemic. And so as we looked at that and considered it further in the body, you know, one of the things that was important was considering, well, how can we best, you know, intervene here and prevent this kind of interaction, or how can we best support it? And then one of the other things that came forward was the knowledge with Melissa Clavoon was sitting on the body at the time, and she had said that there is no post training for law enforcement interactions with young people. And so that raised some flags. We did some work behind the scenes and came up with this program from Strategies for Youth that speaks to practical skills for working with young people. So I want to share a little bit more about where we are with the project. I've just given you an introduction, but we have several phases over several years that will be taking place. And I wanted to fill you in on what's going on at each of those stages, and then where we're headed for next steps. So as I mentioned, this project really originated out of the data subcommittee of the R job. And from this work at that time, a couple of years ago, and this is a classic example, Stephanie, of some analyses that has led to action that came from another outside source. We learned that in this kind of unpacking of what's going on surrounding programs that do exist, we learned that officers nationally rarely receive information on the cognitive development of adolescents. And the brain is neurologically and neurodevelopmentally, not mature until age 25. So this is not just a program that would facilitate interactions for youth, but also for transitional age youth. And so we were quite excited to find strategies for youth and to better understand the successes that they have had throughout the country with other law enforcement agencies, from Boston to Omaha. They have worked with other law enforcement departments in California. Some of our colleagues across, in our county have gone through this training. And so when we learned that, at the time, there was a call that came forward for former earmark funds, or what were called former earmark funds. And so when I learned about that, I reached back out to the committee and to see, is this something we would like to try to get funding for? And the committee agreed. I worked with Melissa to develop a project summary and a budget. And I would say really another big shout out to Melissa, because while, we're pretty strong on the research side of things, the applied side at the local level as it relates to training and the issues that departments have related to training are not things that are our expertise. And it was her suggestion that we include an additional sum of money that would be for backfill expenses. So we applied with the support from the Sheriff's Office, the R Job, Office of Ed, and a number of our other partners in the county for these funds, and it got picked up by Congressman DeSaulnier's office, and here we are. We, effective October 1st, so on Sunday, we will be funded through this Federal Community Project Funding Award for $1.18 million over 4 years. And the funding specifically goes to two pathways. Half of this, $590,000, will go towards the implementation of the effective youth interactions training and make available to all law enforcement agencies in our county. Okay, the other half of the grant funding will go directly back to law enforcement agencies to cover any backfill expenses that they have. Now, we do know that it's not enough to cover all of their backfill expenses, but we're also moving forward and very much hoping that this will be post-certified and maybe the rest of those backfill expenses could be covered. But that's where the funding goes. It goes for no other staff other than those who are rolling out the program. Now, Strategies for Youth will implement the program. We have 21 police departments, including probation, the sheriff's office. We also understand that BART is very much interested in participating in this program too. So we will find a way to try to include them. But with the sheer number of agencies that we have, we cannot feasibly and practically train everybody at the same time. So we're doing this in a staged approach over a period of 4 years, which is the maximum amount of time that the NIJ for this grant program will allow us to utilize. So we're starting Sunday and going for 4 years. There will also be an independent evaluation. I say that maybe a little bit more confidently than I should. We do not yet have confirmed funding for the independent evaluation. We are working with another researcher out of the University of Pittsburgh who it comes actually from the Bay Area and is very familiar with probation. And she has agreed to submit grants with us as kind of external collaborators so that the program as it rolls out throughout the entire county can be examined in a way that is independent of the probation department, independent of the sheriff's office as the initiators of the program. So we want to make sure that there is no conflict of interest that is introduced by somebody like me evaluating this program. So we've submitted 3 grants. We're waiting with, I'm waiting with bated breath. We should hear any day whether or not that gets funded. And the funding for any of those 3 grants would start January 1st. So in alignment with the rollout of the program and would take place for 5 years. Oops, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going a little fast here. So the project assumptions, we're assuming that all 23 agencies are going to participate. And, you know, some may or may not, some are bigger than others. I'm not sure what this is going to look like, but we basically are assuming that all 23 agencies who've been invited to participate will. And as I mentioned, for practical purposes, we're going to be rolling this out in 3 stages. So we will be randomly assigning departments into one of 3 years for rollout. One of the additional benefits of this program is for sustainability. Every department will receive Train the Trainer program. It's a 4-day program. And then with the rollout, each Train the Trainer team for each department will get an opportunity to train their peers within 60 days of their training. And that peer training will be supported also by Strategies for Youth. So it's an opportunity to really ensure the sustainability of the training while also making sure that each department can utilize that training ongoing as they need it. As I mentioned, Train the Trainers 4 days, the peer training is 2. And as a result of the sheer number of agencies, the cohorts, the types of training, there is a very tight implementation and evaluation calendar that has been established. As far as implementation goes, we have 3 stages: the planning, training, and data analysis stage. The planning stage will start, actually, it's already started, I would say. Patrice and I were yesterday with Chief Isa Eamon-Kraus at the police chiefs meeting for the county, and we introduced the program. Patrice did a fantastic job of sharing what the program is about. From everything we can tell, it was really well accepted and received. We've already got a number of departments who have signed on board. So that's where we're starting right now, is basically recruiting law enforcement agencies to participate. We will be reaching out to each of them individually if they haven't already reached out to us, so that we can identify all the participating agencies by the end of the year, so that we can then randomize, so that we can then conduct the evaluation. Beginning November, the November 6th through November 10th, Strategies for Youth Leadership will be coming to the county and conducting a county assessment to better understand how our county law enforcement agencies operate from the standpoint of the youth context, our local context different, better understanding youth related policies and trainings, things along those lines, so that they can customize their training to better fit what's going on in each of our departments. So that's a very special, I think, characteristic of this program, and it makes it one that is makes it more successful, I believe. The implementation training stage, 4-day trainers, train the trainer programs. Those trainings will take place here in Martinez. There will be 3 cohorts of them. They will all be trained in April of the next 3 years, starting in April 2024, and then cohort 2 in 25, cohort 3 in 26. The 2-day trainings will then follow within 60 days of the T3 for each unit. The data analysis stage, data here will data collection will take place throughout the project, because we're going to be comparing before and after arrests for departments that participate. And we will also be looking at fidelity to the training, both trainings. And once we have all the data collected across all departments for the 3 cohort years, there will be a final report that will be prepared by Strategies for Youth. And that will be what I would call more of a higher level evaluation compared to what we are proposing to conduct with University of Pittsburgh. The idea would be that a final report would be disseminated, and that we would share those findings with all of the police chiefs who are involved in the project, get their input on the findings, and share those so that there are no surprises going on. One of the other indicators, I think, of a well-received presentation yesterday by Patrice was that one of the questions that came forward was an invitation for us to come back and share how this is rolling out, and come back in a year and just share where we are with it. So there was a lot of excitement, and that was really exciting for us. This is a lot, but this is basically the implementation calendar. And as you'll see, the columns are for project year 1, 2, 3, and 4. The rows speak to quarters in each of those project years. So you can see the first big block of project year 1 is quarters 1 and 2. So that would start October, as I said, end the end of March. And that's where a lot of this planning work is going to be taking place, and planning for the rollout, where, who, how, Strategies for Youth coming to visit, getting law enforcement participation, setting up interagency agreements so that we can make sure that we have an agreement in order to reimburse them for backfill. So that's one big block. The row on quarter 3 that is a block for each year represents the quarter that each cohort of law enforcement agencies will be trained. And you know, this is maybe a little bit more in the weeds, but the purpose for this is to ensure that the community of youth is kind of in the same stage at each time each agency is being trained. And so we elected on this quarter because it's before school is out, and it's the same time of the year every year, where there would not be theoretically a lot of variability in youth in the community and changes. Most young people would be in school that time period. And then Q4 would be the beginning of post-training data collection for that each respective cohort, followed by project year 4 would be the continuation of that data gathering, as well as preparation for the reporting and sharing, disseminating those results. Now, the evaluation component, as I said, has an asterisk here. We are not yet certain on the funding, but it's important for everybody, I believe, to know that this is independent. It has nothing to do with the ORJ. We will not be doing anything other than facilitating access. The point is to evaluate the causal impact of effective youth interactions at the county level on arrests among youth, the counts of those youth, as well as the racial disparities in those arrests. There will also be a process evaluation that will speak to how the program was implemented across the county, what were the rates of training, things along those lines that could possibly impact the outcomes. And finally, there will be some qualitative interviews that will take place among law enforcement staff that have gone through the training to get their feedback on what worked, what were some of the barriers, what were things that maybe could be done differently next time, or what really, what was a game changer. So we're looking forward to those as well. And this is the updated implementation and now evaluation calendar, where the red area speaks to the work that will take place for the evaluation grant. It will begin, if we get funded, next year in the fall, after the first cohort has been trained. It will theoretically start in January, but it will roll out until project year 5 because of the sheer quantity of data and the, just the characteristics of the analysis that have to take place. So as I pointed, this is not an evaluation of individual law enforcement officers. It's not an evaluation of individual departments at all. Data will be aggregated across the county, and law enforcement departments will be either regionalized or identified as a collective in an aggregate way related to the size of their department, the proportion of individuals that went through training, things along those lines. So it's really intended to be an evaluation to determine whether or not the rollout of this training program at the county level is effective. And so there any kind of identification will be, it just won't be possible, basically, because the data will be collapsed at an aggregate level. So this is the first time that Strategies for Youth has rolled this out at the county level. So it's an important contribution to other jurisdictions across the country that might be interested in doing this. So our next steps, as I mentioned, we're currently recruiting law enforcement agency commitment and participation. Once we get that commitment, and after we're done with our happy dance singing and stuff like that, we will be working to get fiscal interagency agreements in place, and yeah, and Strategies for Youth will be here the week of November 20th or November 6th for 5 days. So we've got a lot of things to be excited about with this. And between this and the Restorative Justice Initiative, we've got some really meaningful projects coming out on the horizon. And as you know, Patrice and I are here to answer any of your questions. and excuse us because we're just really so excited right now. It's just a joyful time to have this kind of success. So, any questions?
I'll add joyful and tiring.
Mhm.
time.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Not
Right,
happy to
exactly,
list.
exactly.
Do it. So
Yeah.
we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
I'll open it up if anybody has any questions.
I'll just add one quick thing, added benefit in this particular training program is that Strategies for Youth actually identifies, well, with our help though, identify local psychologists and licensed clinical social workers who have experience working with youth. They actually help to put on and deliver the training as well.
Yeah.
They also recruit young people to engage in the training too. So it's a very comprehensive kind of way of contextualizing what the experiences are of youth in their own local communities by utilizing some of the local people here. So some of those individuals, both youth and those psychologists, will then, well, once they sign up for it, yeah, there'll be sort of local resources then for the departments to come back and do refresher training or trainings or whatever the case may be. So it really is about building, not just kind of taking a training from somewhere, you know, out there, all the way out in Massachusetts and dumping it into Contra Costa, but really try to customize that for a Contra Costa context and then even further that local community context. So.
Well, that's a really good point, Patrice. Unfortunately, what we haven't done here in this presentation is talk about what the training is like. And I think those components are really important and make the programming really successful for the recipients of it. They go through not only cognitive and neurodevelopment kind of brain biology, but they also go through cases and examples of how youth interpret what law enforcement says and how law enforcement interprets what youth say, and trying to make the connection and build a bridge between those two very different perspectives in order to make a connection. And then they can get to what the question or the issue is at hand, if there even is one. It's just a way of communicating. And Patrice, I think you said this beautifully yesterday. It is, you know, law enforcement knows how to do their job. They've been doing it for a long time. This program helps them do it better with young people. And I hope that we're able to show that.
So after our presentation to the Police Chiefs Association just yesterday, actually, we got really great responses. Denise mentioned BART PD wanted to be a part of this. The Highway Patrol, I think it was a captain that was there, wanted to sign up for this. We received a couple of other registrations already. So we're excited, one, to see that our police department leadership is responding well to this, and that they also see it as an actual need for their department. Hopefully over the course of the next few months, we can address and answer any questions that they have and really support them in signing on board. Yeah.
I do have a question around the selection of like who's going to be trained first. Because I think when we first started having this conversation, we were looking at the data and we said like a lot of young people are getting arrested in Antioch, and so we kind of wanted to start there. But it sounds like it'll be randomly selected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It will
So
be, but
It'll be random.
there is a nuance here, Shayla, and Antioch is one of them. So the issue here technically, and this is an in the weeds kind of answer, but because of the variable sizes of the police departments, randomly can mean that all the large departments get trained at the same time. Technically, we do not want that to happen in order to conduct the evaluation. So Antioch, Richmond, and I believe Concord are our 3 largest police departments. They will be randomized to one of 3. There will be no way that we can train each of those departments in the same cohort. So there's a couple of, yeah, that's a nuance, but yeah, we can't technically start with Antioch, but if they get randomized to the first cohort, that would be great. Sorry, did you get that? I'm sorry, yeah. It would be really great if we could.
And it's really good to hear that Bart is on board too, because, you know,
Well,
public transportation.
well, yeah, so that
No.
was the other thing. We didn't anticipate, I don't think
We
we
didn't
counted
count on
him
Bart.
one. So, so yeah, so these other policing agencies that actually cross multiple jurisdictions.
Mhm.
You know, obviously, we're setting aside, trainings for probation and sheriff's office at a different time. They're not part of the cohort. They serve as their own cohort because of this, the
They serve
distinguishing
different
characteristics
populations. Yeah.
versus the other police departments. But that said, didn't take into account then those other policing agencies that are very active. Didn't know that, but we're very active in the PCA. And, you know, they cover a wide variety of jurisdictions. That said, they're so critical because when you think about highway patrol, that stops, right? And then when you think about BART, a lot of young people do. BART police does interact with a lot of youth on the transit system there. So it's like I said, it's exciting, but it's throwing us for
Yeah.
a loop a little bit. But we're gonna ride with it. Sometimes you're gonna ride those loops. But again, it was great to see that they wanted. They were,
Yeah.
matter of fact, I think they were our first register.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say bravo to this committee. You know,
Yeah.
this committee made this happen. It's a good
Yeah.
example of it, what's possible.
And long time coming too, like this
Yeah.
didn't just, this was a multi-year project, just to get here, and we haven't even rolled it out yet. That's gonna be
Yeah.
another
Right.
few years to go,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's been 2 years just to get here. And right, and it's gonna be another 5 before we have an impact analysis.
My other question too is around the evaluation. So once the evaluation is done, I know like cohorts are yearly, annually. Will like the evaluations then go back and say like, hey, you know, these are the outcomes, this is where we, you know, we've improved, we haven't improved, and will additional training be supplied or?
I don't know. Well, I think the evaluation will speak about changes in arrests, if any, changes in the racial disparities of arrests across the county, not for Danville, not for Antioch. It'll be across the county or regionally. It will also speak to, was the program better accepted in larger agencies, smaller ones, or was it widely accepted by every agency that participated? Things along those lines for the process evaluation. The outcomes evaluation, though, would theoretically and should look at the type of arrests. But the other thing that we added into the evaluation is to compare it with stop data from RIPA. And so not just arrests, because we know that arrest is one step past the stop in the trajectory of justice involvement. So because RIPA data will be public domain I believe, this year and will be available. We can also compare stops for youth before and after the training to see if there's been any differences there as well. So that will be important information for the county as well. As far as they may make recommendations for further training, they may make, you know, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen at that level of depth, because primarily I need to specifically remove myself from that. I can really only facilitate because my history as a researcher will just confuse and provide a level of conflict that I don't think we want to entertain. Does that answer your question, Shayla?
Yes, yes, it did.
Good.
Thank you. Any other comments before we move on? Thank you again for that presentation. I'm super excited that things are moving on.
Yeah,
And
great.
excited that we're getting the funding to do it.
I know. And to support it too. And if we can get post funding, which I'm super hopeful about now, because apparently there have been a lot of leadership changes in various bodies across the state. And so this could be a really good time for us to get post funding and to have even more funding for officers to attend this training. And hopefully it will become standardized. So fingers crossed. We have big hopes for it.
All good things. All right, we want to move to item number 7, which is to discuss update on county involvement in NACO, Familiar Faces Initiative Agency.
Yes, I'll take this on. This is, now let me just give everyone a heads up. There are a ton of reference documents that are under this agenda item. I will not go through all of them. They're for your reference, okay? But all to say, the National Association of Counties has what we call the Familiar Faces Initiative. This is their effort to really connect with counties across the nation and supporting them in bridging the gap in terms of data sharing and data exchanges between the criminal justice system and your behavioral health system. This is to identify what you consider familiar faces, those individuals that cycle through both the justice system as well as crisis response, behavioral health, mental health, those sort of elements in local healthcare systems. So our very own Supervisor Candace Anderson, applied to be part of the Familiar Faces, Leadership Network, which launched, last year it was. And forgive me, I can't see what in the packet on page 28 of the packet, you'll see the list of all of those who were selected, essentially in a cohort fashion this year, and it covers quite a range of counties and states across the country. Yes, and so as part of this network, the various elected officials and or other important county officials in these various jurisdictions received in consultation, technical assistance support. They learn from each other as peers and other best practice sort of sites as to how they're doing this work and bridging the gap and sharing information and identifying who their familiar faces folks are. So we've actually have had the opportunity to participate in 2 what they call peer exchange sort of tours, if you will. I myself and Health Services Deputy Director Matthew Kaufman, am I saying his last name right? Yeah, Kaufman, went down to San Antonio, Texas, the Behar County. They're a a site that has been lifted up through this Familiar Faces initiative as one that has done some really great work in bridging the gap between its homeless service provider, it's local law enforcement, and then it's also local sort of mental health crisis response work and trauma response work. And then Denise actually had an opportunity in representing probation go down to Johnston County, Kansas, down in middle America. So again, another really great site that was showing, practically speaking, across its various operations, how they're sharing information and working with one another. So what does that mean for us locally? Oh, I'm not going through the side. Oh, that's perfect. No, actually, that's perfect. Go back. There we go. Who are familiar faces? So this is what I was mentioning earlier. Familiar faces are individuals with periods of institutional involvement and homelessness. They often lack chronicity. Am I saying that right? Status. Silo service provision is usually the case in a lot of these different systems, and we experience that here. And then also, there are certain definitions and measures that are critically important as local communities are identifying who their familiar faces are. So you can see in this diagram the importance of the connection points, because the individuals themselves, those who we would consider familiar faces, are touching all of these systems either at once in various cycles or what have you, but yet the various systems have not always been well integrated to talk to one another, share information, and be able to coordinate services and resources. And that's why it was really important for Supervisor Anderson that this be something we look into a little bit more deeply, because though for us here in Contra Costa, we have a really great and expansive local healthcare system where housing and homeless services are right there with our health service provision, right? And then also there's the detention side where there's health services being provided there. They're all under one umbrella. But separately though, a lot of our justice agencies that are including probation that are also providing resources, reentry services, other ancillary social services to a similar population, those systems aren't currently talking. So where are we now locally? What we've done was we've learned from a few different jurisdictions. We've actually met with, gosh, quite a few consultants from different organizations that really look at the legal challenges that a lot of these jurisdictions face when you're talking about sharing data, sensitive justice related data, and then also sensitive health privacy related data, right? How do you get past some of the federal, state regulations around all of that so that the systems can talk to each other? We actually met recently with our own county council to kind of talk through what are some of the possibilities or what are the challenges that we will be faced with in trying to bridge the gap there. So we're still in very nascent stages of this. I think it will take some time, but it's certainly an evolution from the work that the county has been that had done in the Step It Up initiative, where we actually had locally, many of us were part of it at one point in time, where we did a sequential intercept mapping, looking at where services are provided across the different intercepts or different junctures, which someone would enter into the justice system or transition through the justice system. So still more to go. We have a long way to go. More conversation that would need to be had, in particular, as it relates to how we can possibly share data. That's really one of the primary sticking points for a lot of us here locally. But luckily, there's been a lot of great examples of how other counties, especially here in California, have overcome some of those challenges. We also have CalAIM coming online that we could potentially leverage to help support us in some of this work. So It's an ever evolving process, but we certainly wanted to share it with you guys. And as I said, if you have an opportunity to, there's a ton of reference information here. Definitely look into them. I would also really emphasize the report here called the Breaking Down Silos, How to Share Data to Improve the Health of People Experiencing Homelessness. While this report was done by the California Healthcare Foundation, and this is the one that actually lifted up the different counties in the state of California that ran into some of the privacy related legal issues and what they did to sort of overcome that. So you got a lot here, both examples across the nation, examples across the state. And I think one of these we had was a blog post written up about one of the peer exchange site events that we attended. So just wanted to share that with all of you about our county's involvement in this really important effort, and hopefully we'll have some great inroads down the road. And then Jill, I know you're here really as public, but is there anything you want to share in terms of Supervisor Anderson's take and feel since she's been involved in this for some time?
And it's just so exciting to be able to take issues and I think having
Oh, Kevin McConnell.
Kevin McConnell.
Yeah.
Was amazing. And so there's a lot of resources out there. And just so, you know, everybody knows, don't get too kind of on your faces because of apparently papers we read. So when they relaunch their next effort, it'll be called something else, just like stepping out into them. But those resources are still there, and then has the work group, internal work group.
No, that hasn't met yet.
Yeah,
No.
and do we need help getting a date?
We'll talk offline.
Okay.
Well, that's it on that one.
Thank you, Patrice. Is there any questions or comments at this time? Okay, I'm like, where my people at? Thank you. Well, if there's no comments, it brings us to our next step, which I jotted down a couple things. One is that I'll be working with ORJ on pulling our work plan and recommendations from previous years, so that we could discuss those at a future meeting, and also to get our recommendations. I think that'll definitely be on our next agenda item for the full body, is to do this report out so that we can finalize our recommendations for the sheriff oversight and put those in, like prioritize those and get that out, actual written document and request. So those are the next steps I have in my, anything. Good. With that being said, our next meeting is scheduled for October 26th. Same time, same place, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.